We get a chat with a very excited Rob Staton today here, Thursday edition of the Rob Staton Show, Seahawks draftblog.com. His weekly is brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926. Provide the highest quality of products and service to the greater Puget Sound area. Get a free quote today at suplinen.com. Give him a call at 253-383-2636. You can check out Rob's work at SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Check out his YouTube page. And, of course, follow him on social media at Rob Staton. We talk to Rob every week. We are inside the Puck Sports Studios, built by Limback Lumber. The summer season is here for your fence and deck season, so give them a call at 206-782-3487. Visit them online at limbacklumber.com. Puck Sports Studios, built by Limback Lumber. He's excited, folks, because his home country, England, is playing for the Euro Cup Championship on Sunday.
Yes.
Against hated Spain.
Hey, listen, I've got no issue with the Spanish, by the way. They are a team to be admired, and a country that I like. But what I will say, Puck, is I didn't know whether, when you were talking about how excited I was, I wasn't sure whether you were going to say it's because England got to the final or because Jamal Adams has signed for the Titans.
Well, I don't know. I'm going to ask you, what are you more excited about? England in the championships of the Euro, or that Jamal Adams will not be a Seahawk?
Listen, I was very excited when I saw the Jamal Adams news, but nothing is going to compare to this. This is, Sunday. If England were to win this trophy on Sunday, it would be the best day of my life. So, that's just the way it is.
Let's make sure your wife and child don't hear this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, listen. Look, when marrying my wife, meeting my wife, and the birth of my children, I would suggest. I found the wedding day quite stressful until I got absolutely hammered by the evening, and then the birth of my son was an arduous experience, and he was a pain in the arse for the first year of his life. My daughter arrived with much less drama, but was still a lot of sleepless nights around that time. I'm hoping the only sleepless night I would have this weekend is because I'm celebrating in Germany. So that's it'd be a special moment. And I have to say, look, when they scored, so they scored with the last second of the game yesterday, and I'm extremely worried that my next door neighbours will be very, very disappointed with what they heard last night.
Well, you were very excited. Who was the, yesterday in soccer? Was it you had the brawl in between? Was it Colombia and Uruguay?
Yeah.
And then what was it? Was it the Brits and who? The folks from the Netherlands, the Dutch. I mean, what's going on with you guys?
Well, look, there is an element of fans who follow the sport, particularly in Europe. Not particularly, mainly in Europe and South America, where there is, we would call, I don't know if this is a word that you guys use, that there is a hooliganism element to those fans, and it's much better than it used to be. Like if you go back to the 80s and the 90s, it would be pretty common for the groups of fans who go for a fight to meet each other in a city centre somewhere and just have it out, and that was part of it. It was great fun for those guys, just to go and absolutely just go to war with each other, and that doesn't happen as much now. But look, you find it. Look, it's a very tribal thing. Some countries have a major hooliganism problem. England used to have one; it doesn't anymore. And there was a minor scuffle in the England Dutch thing, and then
a minor. I mean,
no, yeah, that was nothing. That was nothing.
Really?
No, that was
they
absolutely
destroyed
nothing.
that poor restaurant.
Oh, trust me, that would barely.
Nothing, huh?
It's not. That's not even a ripple of it.
I watched that video. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'm like, oh my god, I've never seen anything like that. That was crazy. Well, congratulations. Are you gonna try and get out there? It's a 6. I'm trying to convince Rob to drive because the flights are hard. 16 hours. That's not that. That's get a buddy, split it. You're fine.
That's the problem, though. Is that the buddy that I go to the England games with? I mean, I've drawn lucky in the ballot for tickets, and he hasn't. So he can't go. So
Okay.
I know someone who's going, so I could meet up with them there, but to drive on my own for 16 hours would be tough.
Oof.
The weird thing is that you can get flights. The flights book very quickly because people are going to go out even without tickets and the hope that they get one when they get there. But I can get there, but I have to do a little tour of Europe. So I could have to fly to, let's say, Copenhagen first, or Madrid, or parts of Spain. You know, it's really crazy the route you have to take, and I've got basically about 4 hours to decide whether I want to do this or not.
Make it happen. Do it. Listen. It may never happen again. You got to do it.
That's the thought. That's what people keep saying. Like it's a bucket list, once in a lifetime thing. Yeah. But if they lose the final, I'll be wishing I was right back at home. So.
All right, let's jump into the great news of the day. Jamal Adams will not be a Seahawk. God, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Look, thank you, Tennessee. Do we send Tennessee a gift? Should we?
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to send them whatever they want. You know, they've done us a solid here, because it did seem as if, I know that there's been like one or two of the reporters saying it was never likely to happen, but it never felt that way to me, Paul. Like it always felt like that was the only thing that was being talked about with Jamal Adams, that the Seahawks were open-minded to him coming back. He wasn't being connected to any other teams. There was like at one point what felt like a very, shall we say, agent-led rumor about maybe the 49ers are interested. Mm-hmm. But apart from that, there was no talk, no chatter at all. It's been a very quiet market for a lot of, Simmons from Denver is the same. There's been a very quiet market. Quandre Diggs is not getting any, there's no chatter around him. So it did feel as if this might be Jamal Adams' only option. And as we were getting nearer to training camp, I did fear that when possibly the first week of camp, you would hear that Jamal Adams has come back or something like this. So to have that removed is a relief for me. It was nothing to do. It was partly to do with his play, but it was mainly to do with the guy himself. I just have no interest in rooting for him as a Seahawk anymore. I want to draw a line under that and move on. And thankfully, now we can. There are still question marks about this Seahawks team, and there are some holes, and we've talked about them. But Jamal Adams was not going to solve anything, in my opinion. And it would have just been a toxic signing that would have created drama and online discourse that just would have taken away from what should be a bright new era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of shared your worries as we got closer to the start of camp, which was 2 weeks away, and he was still out there. And obviously the situation with their linebackers right now with Baker and Dotson, I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to do it. They're going to bring him back. Is John Schneider part of him? Probably. Has a little regret how it was handled. Then we had. I had Teasley, the assistant GM, on, months ago, about a month and a half ago. And he's like, Nolan Teasley, and he's saying, well, if you use him in a different way, we think he's quite an attractive player. Then I'm like, oh my God. Like I came away from that interview with Teasley thinking they're going to bring him back. And maybe they did have significant talks with him, but maybe he wanted too much, or at the end of the day, how they were going to use him in Tennessee was going to be different how they used him in Seattle, and they decided to move in a different direction. But I think for everyone involved, there needed to be a clean break. It felt like he was still a part of that past, right, Rob? That maybe they needed to be a break from the Carroll regime.
I just think the whole episode, unfortunately as well, nobody wants this to go badly, but it's just been an absolute disaster for both player and for team, because when Jamal Adams came over, it's easy to forget this now, but a lot of people were justifying what was a ridiculous trade from the Seahawks. I think it was a really desperate trade that they'd lost Jadeveon Clowney, that they'd tried to replace him with Benson Mayowa and Bruce Irvin, which was never going to get it done. They needed an impact player. The quarterback, Russell Wilson, was talking about bringing in stars at the Pro Bowl, and they'd not done that in free agency. They felt like they needed to make a big splash, and they just went way overboard to bring this guy in. The cost was ridiculous. 2 first-round picks and a third and a player and all of that for Jamal Adams. And they brought him in. But people were saying, look, he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Because I was a critic of the trade when it was made, did not like the cost, thought it was a ridiculous price to pay for a box safety. And people were saying, yeah, but he's on a Hall of Fame. He's having a Hall of Fame career. And he would have come to Seattle, one, to get paid, 2, he wanted out the Jets, and 3, to continue on that path to becoming, an NFL great. And for whatever reason, whether it would have happened at any team, it probably would have done, I suspect, with the style of play that Jamal Adams had. It just hasn't worked. It's been a disaster. He's been injured. There's been embarrassing moments that have kind of dogged him. He just has never had any real connection to this team. He was brought in with this reputation as being a fantastic leader, but never felt like a leader, never felt like somebody that the rest of the players looked up to. I suspect they brought him in and paid so much in Parks, they were hoping they were getting the next Cam Chancellor, and it never once felt like he was that guy. Like someone like Jaron Reed, it felt like he commanded the respect of the defense, and Jamal Adams just looked like a noisy little brother who you just wanted to say, shut up and sit down. So it just hasn't worked at all. I don't think he's going to be able to rebuild his career. And that is another reason why I didn't want to see him in Seattle. Everybody just has to move on. They didn't handle this well. He didn't do a good enough job. The injuries haven't helped. And I don't want to see him in Seattle again unless someone's thrown in his direction and he's yapping away at DK Metcalf because he's got a 7-yard gain on first down.
I'm just looking at it. They don't play the Titans, do they? Dude, they play him. They play him in preseason. Second preseason game. I'm hoping he plays and there's a ball that goes off his helmet. Or gets stuck in the face mask again.
With tackle,
I wanted him to work. I understood at the time the amount that they paid, and it was a significant piece and all of that. I'm not going to sit there and say that I didn't like it. I liked it at the time, and I liked the philosophy of it at the time. I thought that Schneider was trying to be aggressive and not knowing, and watching a bunch of film of him and all of that. When they acquired him, you just read the stats, and he was a pro. It was an all pro, and you're thinking, my God, you're getting an all pro and perfect timing. And how will they use him to defensively? And they've had great success with these guys, these safeties. And I was excited about it, and I liked his personality. But the injuries, and then it just didn't work. But I remember the first game against Atlanta, and I'm thinking, Jesus, man, we've got like the NFL Player of the Year, the Defensive Player of the Year. He was all over the field that day, and you're just thinking, is every game going to be like this? And obviously it was not.
It was that one game, wasn't it?
It was that one game, but I think if we all go back and even those that maybe didn't like the move, I'd love to go back and listen to everyone that Monday, because I remember how excited everybody was after that performance that he put on. But that was it. That was his one game, and it was never good after that. He had his one game. It's like CJ Prosise, his game against the Eagles or the Patriots. That was his one game, and it was never the same.
I was at that game with CJ Prosise. Had that game against the Eagles, and
it's an all-timer, man.
what a great tease he was. And I remember sort of feeling after the Atlanta game. I remember getting a lot of grief for that, because as someone who'd been really critical of the trade and the cost, he looked really good, and people were, letting me hear about it. And I remember thinking, look, if he plays like this, then absolutely, I will write a thesis on why I got that wrong. And I don't take any joy in being right, but with hindsight, it was just ridiculous. What they paid for him was what you would pay for an elite edge rusher or a quarterback who could potentially lead you to a Super Bowl. To pay that much for a safety, and there was no precedent for the cost of that trade. Like, there was no reason for it to cost as much as it did. But I'm afraid that has been one of the things that the Seahawks haven't been very good at, is when they make a splashy trade, they haven't worked, and they keep doing them. And I hope they've kind of learned the lesson with that now.
It is interesting. There's, I'm trying to think, okay, let's go through the significant trades. Okay. Adams is one, right? Then you go with
Harvin.
What? Yeah. Percy Harvin. But again, there's part of me that understands why they did it, because of the great tease that he was. But I guess you look back on it and you go, if that guy can't get along with, who am I blanking on the coach? Who was the coach?
It was Childress, you mean?
Yeah, right.
Minnesota.
And
Brad
you're like, if
Childress.
not Brad Childress, it was the other guy. Oh God, it's gonna drive me nuts. It was Childress at one point, but then there was another guy there, and I'm blanking on who it was. They brought him in for an interview, I think, before they hired Carroll or after it. He's on the staff
Leslie
now.
Frazier.
Leslie Frazier, thank you. And I'm like, if you can't get along with him, like you can't get along with anyone. But there was those, like with Adams, there was those glimpses, those moments where you were like, God, I get it, but it wasn't enough. So yeah, it was a failure. I'm torn on the Jimmy Graham trade because I think now they have never replaced him, Max Unger. So you look back on as a failure. I do believe in this because we talk about this a lot in baseball, right? In baseball, the trade deadline is coming up in a couple of weeks. And what you're going to do is you're going to have the trade deadline. And then what's going to happen after that, right, Rob, is going to be winners and losers. Who won and who lost. And everybody wants to win the trade. I always felt, well, I think both teams can win. That's the object of a trade, is both teams win. And I thought there was a time where Seattle and the Saints both could have won that deal. I think you look back on it and you go, you never replaced Max Unger and you lost it, and your offensive line's honestly been a mess since then. But I also think that Jimmy Graham, if you look at his numbers and what he put up here, he's without a doubt the most successful tight end they've ever had. I just don't think they used him right.
Well, that's the point. I think that's the point with all of these trades.
Yeah.
Is that I think if you are going to make a really bold trade, and in the case of Adams and Harvin, pay them a huge contract immediately afterwards, you have to be convinced that the role that you are bringing this player in to do is clearly defined, that you have great clarity on how that player fits. And the problem is they bring Percy Harvin in, and when he eventually got on the field, they didn't know what to do with him. Like the Minnesota Vikings had him at running back. They'd play him all over at receiver. Yeah. In Seattle, they had him running across the formation, and then they basically had one play for him and as a receiver.
The jet sweep.
Yeah. The jet sweep. Or they'd have him on an end around. Yeah. And that was it. They had no idea what to do with him, and then they just row it off. They brought in Jimmy Graham, who, if you are going to add Jimmy Graham, the one thing you don't do is then try and turn him into a traditional tight end. And they wasted 2 years trying to turn him into traditional tight end. They should have brought him in just to be a red zone and pass catching weapon. But they tried to fit Jimmy Graham into something he wasn't. And it was only until his final season that they just decided, let's just use him as like a big receiver, a big slot, which is what should have been the plan from the start. That didn't make any sense. They traded for Sheldon Richardson. They brought him in. What was Sheldon Richardson when you added him? He was an interior pass rusher who could scream off the ball and get into the backfield. They tried to use him as somebody who could just absorb blocks to free up the linebackers. They wasted a second-round pick on him. They bring in Jamal Adams. We're now hearing this year that the GM and, kind of viewed him as a hybrid linebacker playing in the way that he did against Atlanta, whereas the previous coaching staff wanted to turn him into a more conventional safety. Like, what's going on here? Like, how have they made so many big, expensive trades over the years without any real clue as to how to make the most of those trades? And it's why I think if you are going to make a trade for a quarterback who you just know he's going to step back, he's going to plant his feet, he's going to throw a football. A left tackle, the Dwayne Brown trade is one of the few that's worked for them, because what does he do? He sits there and he pass protects at left tackle. An edge rusher, what's he going to do? He's going to come off the edge and try and get you sacks. They're very clearly, easily defined roles. Instead, Seattle went for players like Harvin, like Graham, like Sheldon Richardson, like Jamal Adams, who either didn't fit the schemes that they wanted, or that they tried to shoehorn them into roles that didn't make the most of their skill set. And all of those trades, as a consequence, did not produce value. It was just crazy to me that they didn't. They didn't have a plan for any of those players that made sense.
I think for all of we always remember the bad trades, and those were significant trades. But I think in the even though it parted ways, this year, they what'd they get Quandre Diggs for?
A fifth
rounder. That was a success.
Hmm.
You don't think that was a success for a fifth rounder?
Oh no, I think it was. I absolutely think
it
was a success. I think it was. I think
the Russell Wilson deal was. Come on, that for them to trade Russell Wilson and to get out of that and what they acquired back for him, success. Marshawn Lynch was a success. I'm going through his list of trades. I don't want to do the draft picks, but I'm just trying to go through a bunch of the ones that he did in terms of overall. But yeah, I mean, we remember the Jimmy Graham and the Harvin, and the Adams one sticks out the most for sure.
The difference though is if you spend a fifth on Quandre Diggs and within 5 months you regret that deal,
right?
You move on. Same with Marshawn Lynch. And, the Russell Wilson trade was an absolute steal. And the Seahawks look very, very savvy for pulling the trigger on that and being prepared to move on. The problem is that it's when they've gone big, it's when the stakes are at their highest that they've messed up. And if you go back through the years, like the trade, like they could have had DeAndre Hopkins for the pick that they traded Percy Harvin away for, and that's not hindsight thought. I wrote an article saying why DeAndre Hopkins was one of the 20 best players in, I think, the 2013 draft, and they traded that pick away for Percy Harvin, and a year later he was gone. So, there were examples like that where they could have used cheap value quality players. And then the other thing with the Jimmy Graham one, I tend to agree with you that I think it's hard to look at Graham's production and sort of find too much fault with Jimmy Graham, especially given the injury he had, which was unfortunate, and the role that he was asked to play, which was ridiculous. But it changed the image and the dynamic of the Seahawks forever, because they went from being a hard-nosed team that was, Marshawn, Cam, we're going to run it right at you, and they brought in a finesse pass-catching tight end who the team used to fight with pre-game before playoff games. The whole Bruce Irvin and Jimmy Graham thing. It was the Seahawks were the sort of the alphas, and they brought in the guy that didn't really feel like much of an alpha when they were compared to the Bruces and the Cams and the Shermans. So I think that was just an odd move. And it's not that every trade the Seahawks have made has been bad, but certainly the ones that they went all in on did not seem to come off.
The jury's still out on Leonard Williams. How do you feel about Leonard Williams? That was for a second round pick and a fifth round pick, a second round pick in 24 and then a fifth round pick in 2025.
I have two views on Leonard Williams' trade. I like Leonard Williams a lot as a player, and I think it was well worth re-signing him just because I think the Seahawks are far better for having Leonard Williams. I still think there's some decent years left in him. Okay. I think that I thought he actually played a lot better at the end of last season than I think some people think, and I'm probably higher on him than others. Okay. I don't like the trade though. Like the trade made no sense. They got carried away. Like they beat the Browns and they were lucky. They couldn't get a yard against the Browns the second half, but because the Niners were on their bizarre losing streak at the time and the Seahawks had got ahead of them in the divisional race, they suddenly went all in on a trade and then consequently got blown out by the Ravens the following week. I mean, it was far too expensive. They could have had a second round pick this year and Leonard Williams if they'd just been prepared to be patient. Instead, they lose the second round pick. They still pay Leonard Williams a fortune, which they could have done as a free agent anyway. But, it is what it is now. We move on, and I do like Leonard Williams as a player.
Yeah, we're going to see. And I think a lot of people are going to be intrigued just how Mike McDonald's going to use Leonard Williams in this system, right? I mean, I think that the jury's still out on some of these defensive players, that have underwhelmed. We've talked about it in the past. What does this mean for a guy like, Darryl Taylor? Can he have some type of bounce back season? Can Draymond Jones do something differently? I think, the skilled players, I mean, there's good players on that defense. It's just how is Mike McDonald going to use them differently than, what Clint Hurt and what Pete Carroll did? And maybe the thing is, maybe there's always talent there. Maybe the talent personnel for the Seahawks saw it, right? And saw it differently than maybe Carroll and the group. And then McDonald comes in and goes, oh yeah, I can make this work. And we shall see, right? What was it? Who missed? I guess what will answer this year's who missed? Did the coaching miss last year, or did the personnel side miss last year?
Yeah, one of the one player that I'm really, I don't know, I'm a little bit concerned about and eager to see some improvement from is Derek Hall, because
looks the part, doesn't he?
Well, he certainly does, and I think when you saw his testing ahead of the 2023 draft, it was very easy to see why the Seahawks decided to take a chance on this guy. But he was the 37th overall pick. That is a prime pick. That in a range where generally you get good players. And he just did not look like an NFL player last year. And, on the field, in terms of his performance, we have to see an improvement from him. And in particular, because around him in that draft range, you have seen players who have had some success and seem to be on the uptick. So Brian Branch was available. He went to Detroit, was many people expected to be a first round pick, and has now gone on to show why many people felt that way. It was a huge hit for the Detroit Lions, and he was available at 37. Players that you could help your offensive line. Like there was a couple of centers there. You got Matthew Bergeron, who was the following pick after Derek Hall. You could have, let's see how Will Levis gets on, because they would have only had to move up 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 spots to get to Will Levis. Now, if Will Levis goes on and becomes a franchise quarterback for the price of a mid to late round pick, would it have been worthwhile to go up and just take a shot there? I mean, obviously they didn't rate him because they would have done that. But, are we going to come to regret not taking that chance on Will Levis when he was there in the top of the second round versus Derek Hall? So I think this is somebody who I'm really eager for McDonald to get his hands on and see if he can tap into what made him such a highly coveted player who they had a first round grade on.
Well, listen, I mean, you get selected in that range. I think expectation you're going to start in a year or two. I mean, come on. I mean, that's what it should be. Whether he turns out to be that player, I mean, that's what the expectation should be. I mean, I think that I think we've gone round and round about this, just the excitement level, and I think the expectation of what this defense is going to look like under him. I love the idea of his defensive kind of, mantra and philosophy is where you it's very offensive like in terms of you show all these multiple looks and then, pre-snap and then post-snap it changes. It's something you don't see a lot with defenses. We see a lot of that with offenses. So, I'm going to be excited and intrigued to see, how quickly do they catch on to this. And I'm curious about the actual talent level of this defense. I mean, I think on paper it looks pretty good. You're on board. You think you're very excited about what the front looks like. Maybe it's scar tissue that I have from the last few years with them defensively, where I'm just like, I don't know if I see it like Rob sees it. I want to be wrong. I mean, I get excited about the secondary. I mean, I do get really. The two players that excite me the most are Woolen and Witherspoon. I just think that Woolen, he had a step back last year, but I just there's so much talent there. And then Witherspoon, I don't know if there's anyone that's not excited about Devin Witherspoon. But yeah, I mean, if McDonald can get it and tap into these guys that the previous staff could not, then they got something there. But I do just get a little leery or gun shy with them defensively still to this point.
I'm incredibly, as time goes on, I'm getting more and more excited about the defense.
Look at you.
I just look at the personnel and the talent and the ability that McDonald had to come into Baltimore and just very quickly elevate them from one of the worst defenses in the league to a top 10 and then to become the first, the number one defense in the league. I just think the way that his systems and his ways of doing this and this deception and trying to keep teams guessing and on the toes fascinates me. When you combine that approach with talent up front, and I think it all starts up front, and to sort of hear them speak that way, because for too long the major investment in Seattle was at safety and linebacker, and now they're pumping all the resource into the defensive line. It's what I've been crying out for years, and many fans have loved to see all of that. And I just think it's going to give them a chance to be really, really good. I think that the stars are aligning perfectly for the Seahawks to have a great defense. Maybe not this year. I still think it'd be pretty good, but I think within it, the year after next, they could be like the Ravens, that taking that jump into top 5 category of defense because of the talent they've got, and they've got another draft to come next season, another off season where they can add even more talent. I just think it's that offense. The offense has got all of the skilled players, hasn't got an offensive line, and they've still got question marks at quarterback. So if they can catch that side of it up with the defense, I think we could be talking, we could be very excited here, Puck, and we could be talking about a team that could legitimately contend very soon.
And the one guy, I don't know, I don't quite view him as adding a free agent, but we didn't get a full season out of, Uchenna Nwosu. I guess if I'm going to jump on the Rob Staton excitement board for the defense, I'm going to jump on there because we did get a full season of them. And, I think that there was, obviously some, the clearly connection that when he went down, the defense suffered, as it should. He's a very talented player. So, having him back in the fold, obviously will give them and Mike McDonald's staff a huge boost.
Yeah, I mean, he's just such an important player because it's not even just I think he's a reliable pass rusher, not an explosive pass rusher, in that he's not going to be somebody who terrifies an opponent. He's not going to give you a sleepless night necessarily as an opposing fan when you're preparing to play the Seahawks, like it would be like what we had every year playing Aaron Donald, but that's a high bar. And you don't expect players to do that.
They truly still lack an elite pass rusher. Yeah. They just don't have that guy on their team.
No, I think, and I do think it would be good to have that because you look at the Chiefs and the Niners who've been in the Super Bowl, not just last season, but, the season before that as well, or the season before last. And they both have, a Chris Jones and a Nick Bosa, somebody who you would reliably call as a star. And having that kind of player is very, very good. But I also think you can have a number of very, very good players that can sort of make up for that. And I think that's what the Seahawks have at the minute. And could Murphy become a star? I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility. Not to the level of a Donald or a Jones necessarily, or a Bosa off the edge, but somebody who could be pretty good, who you sort of think, yes, that is somebody that other teams would love to have. But Nwosu, the thing that Nwosu does is you can play many down. He knows he's going to be good against the run. You know that he's going to be able to play the pass and get you, let's say, as an absolute minimum. If he plays, let's say, just 15 games. Let's say he misses a couple just for the benefit of the argument. He's going to get you 8 sacks, and that's not to be sniffed at. And if he has a really good year, he could get you 12. So I think that's if then the others can contribute, if your Maffeys and your Halls and your Taylors, and then your interior guys can chip into that, you've got the framework for a really good defense. So and his leadership's good. I think you do need players like Nwosu and Reed. You can't all be flashy, skill, fast, quick. Sometimes you need some dogs in there.
Well, of course, and I think you go back to the heyday of this defense, and I think what it appears to be McDonald's strategy and MO is he wants as many defensive linemen as possible so he can rotate all the time. So you got Leonard Williams, you've got Mike Morris. I'm just looking at the depth chart. Reed and Hankins and Draymond Jones and Murphy. Still got Cameron Young. Maybe something's there. Miles Adams. So there is a plethora of guys, and I love that idea of being able to rotate and keep bodies as fresh as you can, because these teams and these players, and they'll wear down as the season goes. So if you can keep them fresh, that was the greatest thing about that 2-year run with the Super Bowl teams, was that did they have good players? Did they have a dominant pass rusher? They didn't have a dominant pass rusher, but they had guys that they could rotate in there. That were, dominant in those smaller, limited roles. What's the jump you need to see? I was just looking back to last year. Them stopping the run, even though teams are getting away from the run more and more. I get that. It's still teams want to establish the run. Everybody wants to be able to run the football. They gave up 138 yards on the ground a game last year. Where does that got to jump into? You want to see them in the middle of the pack? You want to see it around 110, 10, somewhere in there, 105? What kind of jump do you want to see from that?
I actually think that the Seahawks could take a significant jump here. I think there was some schematic issues, just players not being in the right places, some just players looking at each other at the time. And also I think that just the heart and the soul had gone. The game that is going to give me nightmares until... and you know what I'm going to say, it's that Pittsburgh game. I mean, it was embarrassing, to see a team as, let's be fair, as average as the Steelers are or were last year, especially with what was essentially their third string quarterback in behind center. And, you couldn't even go, we're going to make Mason Rudolph win the game. It was, no, we're going to let you run all over us, and then Mason Rudolph's going to have an easy time. Like, it was so ridiculous, and they have to remove those. There's going to be some games where teams will run on you. It's very hard to just shut teams down to the extent. And look, the Ravens' defenses under Mike McDonald were not great. They weren't. even in the games against the Rams and the Niners, they didn't defend the run particularly well, especially against the Niners. So I do think there are going to be some games where teams are going to get after you. They're going to find some schematic holes. They're going to have good players. They're going to block well. They're going to run on the Seahawks. It's about not being totally useless. And that is what the Seahawks have been, for the last few years with the run defense. When you pair that with a pass rush, which is non-threatening, it's a terrible combination. So what do I want to see? It's hard to sort of give an average per game. I'd like to see them middle of the road.
Yeah, that's what I want to see.
For run defense. And if they can do that with the defensive linemen they have and the pass rushing options they have to elevate their pass rush, to be a threat home and on the road in those games, that will give you the chance to field a top 10 defense.
202 yards on 46 carries.
Well, it felt like 2,002 yards, frankly, watching that game.
It was unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. God, Mason Rudolph, so terrible. God, even he had a good game, too. He was 18 of 24 for 274 yards. He had a QBR of 71. Good Lord.
It just felt as if, like, what are we watching here? Bad. That was probably at its bleakest for me in the Carroll era, because when you get to that point, like I suspect behind the scenes decisions had been made by that point. But to us on the outside, we have no idea. And like I'm watching that and I'm thinking, you're surely not going to trot this out again next year. Carroll, Hurt, the whole crew back again. To know that it's going to be different and that we have at least some cause for optimism is.
And then they followed that up a week later in a game in which they won, where they surrendered 206 yards on the ground to Arizona, and the dead corpse of James Conner averaged damn near 6 yards a carry.
Yeah, and a game they won because the Arizona kicker missed two easy kicks.
Yeah,
I mean, it's reminding me of that period is it feels like such a long time ago now. Like it feels like so much has changed and has obviously changed and for the better. It needed to change. Like you couldn't have that again, and it was becoming an annual thing. This like they had no idea how to fix it, and I'm glad they've done something about it. And I've got huge confidence in this coaching staff to fix this issue. But again, I don't think there'll be an elite run defense team. I think the hope has to be that they can be somewhere between 15 and 20 next year, which is not great, it's not terrible. And then if they can really elevate their pass rush, then that can
they separate? Like I think the question is now, can they shrink the gap between themselves and the 49ers? And by doing so, can they leapfrog the Rams in the NFC West? Well, and they're separated by 3 games with the Niners a year ago.
Well, what I would say, I want to ask you your thoughts on that, because I think that definitely with the Rams, I think we are underestimating the impact of losing Aaron Donald. I keep, people talk about, well, like they've got my mind's, I had a lot of scotch last night. My mind's gone. I can't remember the guy. Is it Turner who was playing next to Aaron Donald? Like he was being vaunted as like, wow, what a good player. Colby Turner, I think it is. What a good player. And as a rookie, he doesn't have Aaron Donald next to him next year. So let's see how good he is. Like we're talking about one of the all-time legendary defensive. One of the all-time legendary players, period, regardless of position, is no longer there anymore. So let's see how he gets on. Maybe having Jared Verse and Braden Fisk inside will make up for it and they'll be fine. But let's see how they get on. So I think and Matt Stafford's a year older, Cup's a year older. I know they've obviously got Puckett who's come in and done quite well. But, I think there's a clear opportunity to overtake the Rams, not just to close the gap, to overtake the Rams. And with the Niners, look, Greenlaw's going to be missing for a large chunk of the season because of his Achilles. George Kittle's a year older. The left tackle's a year older. Chris McCaffrey's just been paid. There's players now who are getting paid a lot of money. They've got to get over another Super Bowl loss. They're a year removed from having to make a decision. There's a lot of pressure on the quarterback this year, by the way, with the Niners, because he knows if I have a great year, I'm going to be set for life. My grandkids' grandkids are going to be set for life if I have a good year. That's a lot of pressure to deal with. Now, I think he's got the best coach, and he seems to be quite level-headed himself as a quarterback. The boy will be okay. But then the Niners have got to make a call. Can this guy get us to where we need to get to justify paying him the kind of contract that, let's say, Jared Goff's just got? So that in a front office, they'll be sort of thinking, we don't just need to see good, we need to see great from this guy.
I don't remember where were. Do you recall where you were? When was this game? It was Christmas. And the Christmas, had we already started to get the rumors that Carroll was out?
The rumors were starting after the Cowboys game.
Okay. Was Mike McDonald being mentioned at all by that Christmas game when the Ravens just hammered the Niners? Do you recall?
Yes. So
Okay.
I do remember it. I don't know why I remember this so well.
Because everyone was excited after that game because their defense just completely shut them down.
Well, I can tell you, I was listening to Puck and Jim, and this guy called Mike Garofalo came on and said that he, like, the whispers from the Cowboys game were that
you would think I would have remembered this.
Yeah. There was, I think he was suggesting that Dan Quinn was, in a good position for that job, but obviously, look, things changed, and McDonald stock just rose, didn't it? And Quinn's.
But was McDonald's
the Green Bay game?
Yeah, but I got to go back and somehow listen to that. Was McDonald's name was out there at that time, right?
There were Seahawks fans saying, "I want some of this."
Okay.
He wasn't being linked specifically with the Seahawks. I think a lot of Seahawks fans wanted offense, but there were people going, "I can get down for a bit of this, for a slice of my McDonald after what he did in that game."
Yeah, he had 4 picks in that game, and they handcuffed him. Yeah, well, we are about 2 weeks now, less than 2 weeks. In fact, the Ravens, as we record this on Thursday, July 11th, the Ravens are reporting like in 3 days. They're rookies. They make their rookies get there so early. It's unbelievable. And then, we're less than 2 weeks from that getting underway, and we can actually talk, some football, like real. Well, we really can't because it's training camp. Boring.
It just feels like it's near, though. Like when that to me is like the bit when I read on Twitter this week, because obviously the month-long soccer tournament over here, it's killed a month for me. And when somebody said it's 2 weeks, I think it was like a couple of days ago, 2 weeks to training camp, I was like, wow, that's kind of crept up. So that feels like at least we're on the countdown. The training camp starts. You've got to tick that one off. Then you get the first preseason game, and then get those out the way, and then it's time. And that's and when it gets to the sort of the week of that first game, man, it's going to be exciting. To see a new era of Seahawks football. It's going to be so fascinating, and the first game is an interesting one against the Broncos. So
all right, my friend. Well, good luck on Sunday. I hope you can find a way there, whether you go by plane or by car, or I guess you can't go by boat, but whatever. I hope you get there, and whatever you have to do, get there. Go root on your team. All right, make it there.
Yeah. Whatever happens, there will be tears at the end, because I am the man that will not do my man points any good. But,
no, it's okay to cry, Rob. It's sports. Rob Staton from the Puck Sports Studios, built by Limback Lumber. You can watch and listen to Rob every Thursday here at Puck Sports. It's all brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926, providing the highest quality of products and service to the greater Puget Sound area. Get a free quote today at suplinen.com. Give them a call at 253-383-2636. All right, Rob, we'll talk to you next week. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, man.
All right, again, catch Rob every Thursday, pucksports.com. Listen, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Check it out on YouTube as well. We'll talk to you next week.